Hello and welcome to Chapter 9 of the Reading Corner with Mr. Wills. Today we're going to be looking at Chapter 9 of the fantastic book The Boy at the Back of Class by Onjali Q. Rauf. Yesterday was a fantastic chapter, I think you'll all agree. Today, arguably even better. So let's jump in. This chapter is called The Big Fight. The next morning I told Josie, Michael and Tom about the unexpected adventure my mum had taken me on, and they said that they wanted to come with me next time to meet the man in the red turban with the king's heart too. None of them had ever seen the inside of a pomegranate before, so I tried to describe the colour and shapes of the seeds to them on the bus to school, but they all looked confused, so I drew this for them in the back of my exercise book. I think pomegranates are now my most favourite fruit in the whole wide world. Not just because of the way they taste, but because of how they look. On the outside, they look like shiny balls that have been dipped in a bucket of sunset colours, like peach and pink and gold. But the inside is even cooler, because when you pull one open, you find a million sparkling red rubies all squashed together inside a round suitcase that is bursting to get out. You have to push each one gently, Mum had said when I cut mine open and shown me how the seeds popped out. See? As if you're plucking out jewels from the roof of a cave. She showed me how to peel off the skin lying between the seeds too, but I didn't like that part much because the peeling looks like bits of old snake skin that I saw at the zoo once. I meant to give the pomegranate to the new boy at the home time, but I was so excited that I couldn't wait until then. So as soon as the bell went for first break, I hid the pomegranate under my school jumper and hurried out into the playground with it. We're not allowed to take any food out into the playground because we're only supposed to eat snacks in the dinner hall. But I wasn't going to eat it or make anyone else eat it, so I don't think that this counted. The new boy followed us out because he knew we were friends now. He had stopped disappearing every break time and only went to have his seclusion during lunch times. Even Miss Hemsey had stopped coming out during first breaks and went into the staff room, which I think meant that she knew that we were the new boy's best friends as well. "Here," I said as soon as we got to the corner of the playground, and pulling the pomegranate out from under my jumper, I handed it to him. "It's for you." Josie and Michael looked at each other and Tom looked at me as we waited for the new boy to say something, but he just stared and stared and stared. First at us and then the pomegranate. I didn't know what to say or whether to say anything at all. "Knew we should have put a sticker on it," whispered Tom, shaking his head. Then slowly the new boy reached out and took the pomegranate in his hands. "Home," he said quietly, his lion eyes getting very big. "I have home." "Home? Yes, that's right," I said. "Your home is Syria. I've seen it on a map. You know, map." The new boy fell quiet, and then, for the first time since we had met him, he smiled. Not a small smile, or a side smile, or even a half smile, but a real, proper smile that went from one cheek to the other, and which made his eyes smile too. He opened his mouth to say something, when suddenly Brendan the bully pushed past us. "Gimme that," he said, and snatched the pomegranate from Armit's hand. "Give that back," I shouted, feeling scared and angry all at once. "Make me," sneered Brendan the bully as he turned round to face me. I don't know why, but sometimes when someone you don't like looks at you right in the eye, they suddenly seem to grow taller and you suddenly seem to grow shorter, even when really you're both just the same size. Usually it's only for a few seconds, but then you grow back to normal height again, but sometimes it goes on for so long that you wonder if you'll ever be back to the height you used to be. This was one of those times. When Brendan the bully turned to look at me, he stared into my eyes so hard and for so long that he seemed to grow by at least 2 more inches. But I was feeling so hot and angry that I could feel my ears going red, and I didn't care. I took a step forward and tried to grab the pomegranate back. "Go on, try again," he laughed as he whipped it away and held it high above his head. I could feel my face getting redder and redder and my legs getting shorter and shorter as soon as I tried to jump to snatch it back from him. Then suddenly he threw the pomegranate to Chris, who was standing behind me. Chris caught it and tossed it up and down in one hand, waiting for us to try and do something. Josie and Tom and Michael all lunged forward, but Chris was too quick and threw the pomegranate to Liam, who quickly threw it back to Brendan the bully. They might have carried this on all break time because Brendan the bully likes playing this game and no one is ever beating him at it. But then what happened next was so unexpected, so shocking and so fantastic that even Brendan the bully didn't know what to do. Because suddenly, with a huge roar, Armet ran straight at Brendan the bully and, like an angry lion, crashed into him with his head. Brendan the bully fell backwards onto the floor, his legs swinging into the air. We all gasped out loud, but Armet didn't stop there. He jumped on top and, with his face red and patchy, and punched Brendan the bully as many times as he could, shouting something that none of us could understand, but someone behind us cried, "Fight!" And everyone in the playground ran over to watch. And this was the most shocking thing of all. It wasn't really a fight. You need 2 people, at least, to be fighting for it to be a fight. And Brendan the bully wasn't fighting back. Not at all. Not even for a second. Instead, he was holding his arms over his face as Armet continued punching and roaring and shouting at him, all with his might. "Break it up now!" shouted a voice as the crowd parted. It was Mr. Irons and Mrs. Sanders who came running through. But Ahmed wouldn't stop. He was like a machine, but he didn't have an off button. And he continued to punch, 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 just as hard as he could. "Right, young man!" called Mr. Irons, and grabbing him by the back of his jumper, Mr. Irons lifted Ahmed off Brendan the bully, whilst Mrs. Sanders pulled Brendan the bully back to his feet. Everyone fell quiet, but I don't know if that was because we were all wondering what was going to happen next, or because none of us could believe that Brendan the bully had actually been hurt. His face was bright red and his eyes looked watery. And there were tiny stones from the playground stuck to the sides of his cheeks and the back of his jumper. With a horrible glint in his eyes, Mr. Irons stared down at Ahmed and shouted, "What do you think you were doing, boy? Eh?" Ahmed stared angrily at the floor and didn't say anything. "Who started this?" shouted Mrs. Sanders, who was so angry she had forgotten to look over her glasses and was looking at everyone straight through them instead. I immediately pointed at Brendan the bully, and so did Tom and Josie and Michael. "Right, all of you with me now," ordered Mrs. Sanders, dragging Brendan the bully by the arm across the playground and into school. Mr. Irons flicked his hand and pointed to the door, his nose whistling louder than it had ever whistled before. I followed Tom and Josie and Michael as we all hung our heads and made our way through the crowds. Ahmed stared at us and then stared at the floor. His face was even redder than mine, and his lion eyes were so big and wet it looked like they were drowning. He wiped away an angry tear and looked back over his shoulder. I looked back too and saw lots of bright pink spots all over the ground. The pomegranate had smashed open, and all its ruby red seeds had been crushed under everybody's feet. After we told Mrs. Sanders all about what had happened, she gave me 50 lines to do for taking the pomegranate out into the playground, and said that Ahmed and Brendan the bully had to write lines every night for the rest of the week with Mr. Irons. We tried to tell her and Mrs. Khan that the fight wasn't Ahmet's fault, and that sometimes hitting someone when they're being horrible and taking things that are yours can make you feel 100 times better than just telling the teacher ever would, even 1,000,000 times better. But they just shook their heads and said Ahmed should never have ever have hit Brendan the bully. We didn't say anything after that because sometimes you can just tell when grown-ups won't listen to you anymore. Usually they say, "That's the end of it," or "I've said my piece," and that's that. But teachers always say, "That's all, you can leave now." As we left, I told Ahmed that I was very sorry for getting him in trouble and that I would never try and find another pomegranate for him. All he did was give me a nod and a thumbs up. I think it was his way of telling me not to worry, and that being able to roar like a lion on top of a bully was worth doing lines for, even if it was hundreds of them in a language that he didn't even speak yet. As we all went home that afternoon, we talked about the fight and how Ahmet was going to be famous because he was the first boy ever to have beaten up Brendan the bully. "You wait and see," said Tom. "Everyone's going to be talking about it. Everyone's going to want to be his friend. He's going to be a cool kid." I guess Tom was right, but it made me feel sad. If Ahmet made friends with the cool kids, that meant he wouldn't want to talk to us or play football with us anymore. There's a law that says cool kids can only ever hang out with other cool kids, and they mustn't ever talk to us except for when they're put into a group with us by a teacher. I don't know who wrote this law, but Michael knows all about it. I guess his mum must have told him. But it turned out Michael was wrong about the law, because Ahmet never stopped being our friend, not even when he became the most popular boy in the school for beating up Brendan the bully, and not even when all the newspapers in the world made Ahmet the most famous refugee kid on the planet. I hope you enjoyed that. Join me tomorrow for chapter 10. It's a long one, so we're going to do it in 2 parts. Thank you very much. See you.